and welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
Hi, I'm Larry.
Hi, I'm Jesi.
I'm Tori.
And I'm Josh, and we are still enjoying the aftermath of the celebration of 300 episodes and Jesi's birthday.
Cheesecake was awesome.
Yeah, it's
I'm
good.
so happy. It was
Mm-hmm. I'm happy to hear that. Big Apple Bakery makes some great...
oh, that's where it's from? It's very good.
Yeah.
I like it.
Is that the same place you got my...
Don't talk with your mouth full.
Is that the same place you got my cannolis?
No.
Oh.
That's from La Scala.
Wisconsin.
That's a good place.
Yeah, it is. We've gone there for years.
We're already off on. We've already gotten.
We are going over a work that Jesi selected. It's called Endurance, Shackleton's Incredible Voyage, and this version was written by Alfred Lansing. And Jesi, you have a discussion starter?
I do. So... how am I going to start this? Alright, I think I'm going to go this way. So Shackleton was a clear embodiment of pure leadership and determination. We find that the men respected him and in a sort of way had this faith in him that you don't really find amongst many ship or crews of sorts when things go wrong. So do you think it was the men's dedication to Shackleton or Shackleton's dedication and commitment to his men that made their survival possible? And do you think it would have been possible otherwise?
I look at page 16, and that compares him to Amundsen and Scott, where they say, for scientific leadership, give me Scott. For swift and efficient travel, Amundsen. But when you are in a hopeless situation where there seems no way out, get down on your knees and pray for Shackleton.
Yes, I feel like that's the
But
perfect line.
Because I know that Larry, being a Jets fan, can attest to the fact that there's the coach
When
that
there's no hope.
the coach that he has right now. I think that
Where's my son?
there's the coach that they have right now in Adam Gase said he has been described as being more about play calling and offensive formula as opposed to getting to actually knowing his players and being able to you know my information is going to be quite valuable.
Yes.
There will be a quiz.
We don't know sports.
Make a
we are
long
women.
story short,
There is a point here.
there is more to accomplishing a mission than just statistical information and technical formulas. It takes knowing your people, being able to have a grasp of humanity, and not just people's talents, but also how they operate as people and how they can fit in particular situations.
Seeing them as people with strengths instead
Yeah.
of just another cog in the machine.
And weaknesses. Because you got to
Yes.
account for things.
Yeah,
And the other thing,
absolutely,
too, that Shackleton does is that I think is really good is you get the impression that he never stops thinking about what he can do to improve the situation.
No, he is a servant leader in every sense of the word, where
Like-
he thinks about, his crew, and his crew is tantamount to, is paramount, sorry. So, to answer your question, I think it's his faith in his crew that helps them survive in the long run, because the crew had the faith in him. But they wouldn't have faith in him, I don't think, as devoutly as they did, if it weren't for the fact that they knew he was there with them.
What stood out a lot to me, I mean, this is my second time reading the book. I love it, and to me, Shackleton is just this, like, superhuman being. Like, oh my god, what he did. But that aside, as much as I like the man, I think the one thing that stood out most to me is that throughout the book, he doesn't seem, or at least the way it's narrated by Lansing, he doesn't seem to really, like, he treats all his men equal.
Yeah.
As if they were all in the same position, including himself, where there's even a few passages where they say, like, he gets mad when the chef gives him preferential, meals.
Yeah.
Or tries to slip something special to him. He's like, no. Like, I am part of my men.
He's the kind of leader that people in our country need right now.
Yeah.
Because leaders are supposed to serve their people.
Like I said, a servant leader. Yeah.
Yes, as Tori said,
Yeah.
that the people you have that illusion that we're supposed to serve our leaders, which in a way we're supposed to abide by their wishes or orders, but it is in retrospect a team effort.
The leaders inspire their individuals that are under them to follow their lead. It's not that they force them to do so.
And I think that
very clear here.
This here was a team effort.
Yes.
I think that's why they succeeded in everybody on that particular voyage survived.
Every single one, which to me is just mind-blowing. I mean, you would have... if I had heard of this story, like, prior to reading it, like, oh yeah, this is what this man did. Like, I would have at least expected one or two men to have been, like, crushed by ice or drowned or died or something.
Yeah,
I can't
and
believe
it's
that
like,
they all made it.
and one of my favorite points is when I believe they're at Patience Camp, when the floe opens up and the tent falls into the flow. Everybody gets out, but there's still like the sleeping bag that's moving around, and then it's his man and it's trapped, and just one hand picks him up and the flow closes. And it's like, he's alive because Shackleton ran over there and just grabbed him by one hand and just lifted him out of the water, like, you will not die on my watch. Like, he's just this beast of a man who made sure all of his people survived. And what really gets me is that, they get to Elephant Island and he's like, well, y'all can't make this trip, so I'm going to take 5 guys and you guys stay here, okay?
Right.
And they're like, okay. Like,
and
they didn't leave. They didn't do it. They were like, no, he told us to stay.
There was no
stay.
mutiny. There was no, oh, he's leaving us here to die. Because he had such faith in his people, and because he supported them so much, they believed in him and, followed his word.
What, leadership skills do you think instilled that faith in his men?
Like we said, they saw the strengths and weaknesses of the person. They were a human being that had a family, that had, more than just the boat and what they were doing at the
beginning of the book, when he's picking his crew, they basically say no interview lasts more than 2 minutes. He decides in that 2 minutes whether or not you're worthy to be on this expedition or not. And he hired people that weren't actually necessarally skilled at what they were supposed
Leonard
to do.
Hussey is the meteorologist.
Yeah, and he has no I can't say that one. Thank you, that one. He has none of that skill absolutely whatsoever. But it's like, you're the meteorologist. Like, he just kind of picks people based on his first impression of them, and then takes them on this voyage, and then all of a sudden they're just almost, I don't want to say blind faith, because obviously there were some problems, that arose, and he took care of them, but essentially, this just faith in him from the moment they left London or England, wherever it was, to the moment they got back. How do you instill that kind of faith in someone? Sure, you can see them as a human being, but, what is it about Shackleton that makes them just go, no, I'm going to follow this guy to the end of the earth, and if he leaves me behind, that's okay, I'd wait for him.
I think a large part of it is that he trusts his instincts.
Yeah, he's very
and then when he makes a decision, then that's what they're doing. He doesn't he never doubts anything that he decides to do after the decision is made. It's made, right? There's one part in the book where he's talking to one of the crew members about doubt a little bit, right? You think we should have done that? You think we should have done that, or whatever? And but that's it, right? Other than that, every time that he makes a decision, and these are life and death decisions every time. The fact that he is assertive enough to trust and confident enough to trust his gut, I think that goes a long way. And I think that's the main reason that they make it back, especially the last stretch across that island.
Yeah,
And they
across
get back to
South Georgia.
civilization.
Mhm.
Yeah, and they have to go up all those mountains and down, and then they end up having to like grab onto each other and slide down the side of a
Yeah,
of a cliff.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
but yeah, I think that's a large part of it. And I think you see it too, and to be with the way that he picks people to be on his crew.
Mhm.
You know, he's not interested in your life story. He's not interested in all the facts necessarily, and some of the decisions he makes are bad too, right? That lead like where he decides that they're not going to need food, so they're going to stop. Whatever it was something related
Yeah,
to food.
they had killed like three seals or something. He's like, we don't really need food right now. It's too dangerous to go get it, so we're just gonna leave them. Just leave them there.
Yeah. Now, was that the right decision or the wrong decision? You know, it turned out probably it was the wrong decision.
Yeah, because they ultimately ended up needing food a little bit later on. So
Yeah. But still, you know,
he stuck.
he
by
was no
his word.
nonsense. Yeah, it was. It's just like this is what we need to do. This is what we're going to do. So that's. I think that goes a long way.
I also think that because he's so hell-bent at wanting to accomplish what it is that he sets his mind to doing, he has that sense, he has that drive that he has to get it done in whichever way that you have, that he's able to work people the way that he wants them to fulfill his desires, and by that it means seeing them in a particular light and being able to play the human game as opposed to just using statistical data and whatnot.
I found very shocking the high spirits of the crew the whole time.
Mm.
Like, first they're trapped in the ice, and they're like, we have to winter in Antarctica, which sounds awful.
Mm.
Like that sounds like a nightmare.
And they're yours
And
flipped.
they're just like, well, we can play cards. Let's play cards. Okay, we'll play cards. And they'll like make bets on things like who's gonna buy this when we get home and who's gonna make this dinner. And it's like they just keep in the high spirits, and then, you know, the boat gets crushed by ice, and he's like, yeah, guys, nah, we can't stay on this boat. We have to leave and go out onto the ice and try to survive in Antarctica. And they're like, yeah, okay, but don't worry, we'll bring the pack of cards. And they just stay in high spirits even as their boat is being crushed, and they're stuck in this tundra, like sort of wasteland of nothing but penguins and seals. And they still keep
That's
these
a
high
little-
spirits.
That was something
Like-
that I thought was very interesting, was the color commentary in this book, where they discuss every minuscule thing about what happened while they were there, be it the activities that they engaged, the methods that they used in order to survive, in order to keep themselves sane. There was even something about one of them, I think it was Wild, the first mate.
Yeah, wild.
He had them each write down what kind of breakfast did you want to.
And that's like such
were
a
you
great
looking
idea.
for, or what food item were you looking forward to when you returned home?
It was
Window
that
maps.
goal, like you said, that
Yeah.
like single-minded goal of this is where we're heading, this is what's going to happen. So I think it was just a random draw of people that ended up being like a good mix. And then you had this magnetic individual who was, you know, devoted to them. So it was this perfect storm, so to speak, of like favorable outcome.
I was kind of, you know, discussing this with my dad a little bit last night, because I really love this book. I can't tell you guys how much I've been talking about this book for a long time.
Yes.
And one of my favorite quotes by Shackleton, which I feel like kind of tells you a little bit about who he is as a person, along with his family motto, which they mention in the book, by endurance we shall conquer. After this whole expedition, and he got all of his men back, he's quoted saying, "Superhuman effort isn't worth a damn unless it achieves results." So I feel like that also kind of points a little bit at who he is as a person and his character and his leadership skills, because he doesn't care if you can lift a car off somebody. If it doesn't actually save them, it doesn't matter. And the way he sees it is, if I'm going to make this 800 nautical mile voyage, it's not going to mean anything if any one of my men die. And being that, I believe he was one of the first one. He was the first one on the rescue boat going back to Elephant Island. He made sure every single one of his men were off the island before he got back and headed towards, like, this kind of commitment to his men was just outstanding. It was almost just like a love for them. Like, you joined my crew, you are now part of my family. This is how we're going to make this happen. I feel like that really points to who he is as a person, and how his family, in a way, sort of bred him to be this amazing leader. Whether they did it on purpose or he did it in his own kind of
Could have been a bit of both, but I think what he did was extraordinary. The way that he was able to elevate that, because he was on Scott's mission as well, the Discovery.
Yes.
And but he was able to. They failed on that mission. They didn't make it to.
It wasn't even just so much this whole thing too, and I can't remember if they make mention to it in the book, but the crossing of South Georgia has only ever been successfully done by two groups of people, and the first group was Shackleton and the two other men that crossed this island to get to that whaling port or shipping port, whatever, so that he could be like, hey, my guys are down there, can you get them? But the second group was 40 years later with modern equipment, and it was a bigger group, and they had to do things a certain way, and it took them significantly longer to do it, even though they had all of that modern equipment. So again, it just kind of shows you how careful he was, but also willing to take risks that were necessary. So like, he was cautious but risk-taking. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Already then.
When it comes time to make a decision, he makes it.
Yeah.
Yep. Do we have any final thoughts?
I liked it.
It was a compelling story, and I think it was very well written. It was very engaging, and it's just baffling that this is like an actual thing that happened.
Yeah,
like the fact that all of them survived.
I know.
Is just.
It was.
And I think this is a very
mind-boggling.
important text as well, especially when it comes to giving us insight on this particular voyage to Antarctica. If I had any criticism, it would be the fact that they finish right off at them him rescuing the remaining people on Elephant Island. I think that there was much more. I've read so many biographies that have an epilogue as to the conclusions of everybody, and how because Shackleton does go back to the UK as a celebrity, but the celebrity in the sense that
Everybody knows who
everybody
he is.
knows who
But
like
a real celebrity.
he went on one more voyage to South Georgia with a few other people, some of which were from.
He's actually buried at South Georgia, and they're set up a museum for him and his endurance expedition there. It's a small museum, but and I looked up this really cool like cruise thing that you can do for 23 days, where you can actually like cruise to Antarctica, and then you end up at South Georgia where they do, and that's one of the only ways you can get there is by doing an Antarctic cruise to. And that's where you just end up, and you're allowed to go into the museum. And like, I mean, they do smaller trips to Elephant Island, where the only thing erected at Elephant Island is a statue of the bust of Shackleton, to commemorate like what he did, and supposedly it's right where his crew lived. Like the only place they could have lived. And you can look up these pictures on Google, which my Goodreads review, I made sure I put it. It's like, if you're going to read this book, like as you're reading it, look up these places, because they had a photographer with them, so pictures were taken.
And everybody kept diaries.
Yeah,
and they were
everybody
told to
kept
keep
diaries.
them too.
They all wrote books, or most of them wrote books. Like my copy of Endurance, it's not by Alfred Lansing. It's another endurance story written by Worsley. And then I found another book written by Shackleton himself. So like they all wrote, this same voyage, but from the different aspects.
I think that's the other amazing part of it is everybody survived, and it's so well documented.
Yes.
That everybody survived.
Every human survived.
Yeah,
Yes.
the dogs killed
The,
me.
the, dog,
I
the
thought
cat,
we were gonna get through this
I
and not
know, me
talk
too.
about the dogs.
I cried so hard when it's like, well, we had to kill the puppies. I'm like, not the puppy.
that was their way of. They had to. That was their way of food there. Even in Greenland, there's no plant.
Well, what got
based
me
dieting
so
options.
they didn't immediately turn to the dogs for consumption. I believe it was like the first 2 or 3 dog sled teams that they did kill. They buried them, and it kind of also shows you a little bit about how much these dogs meant to the men, because when they were told that, okay, we can't feed these dogs anymore, they need to be put down, which to me is a good thing, because obviously these dogs cannot survive.
Yeah, you're not
in the
torturing them.
like, you're not just abandoning them, you are putting them out of what could be an awful existence. But it saddened the men, because they were puppies. It made them happy. It wasn't until like the last 2 dog teams that they had to turn to the dogs for me, because it was almost winter at that point, I believe. And so all of the migrating penguins and seals, like, they weren't coming around. And
There
it
were no
was
other
either,
targets.
like, it was only because they had to. Which is, I guess, understandable in such a survival kind of situation. As sad as it is. But, I mean, all the men do make notes in their journal about how sad it is to see them go, because it made them happy. Like, the puppies were, like, yeah, they were worked hard, but there they were, ready for a pet or a bone, like, puppies, you know?
And it shows you how desperate the situation was getting, where they didn't want to do that. They treated them
Yeah, they were part of
better
the
when they
team,
could.
yeah.
And even when they had to kill them at first, right? Like you said, they buried them. And
Yeah.
things were getting
they're-
so
they're-
desperate at the end that they had to eat them too. So rough going. Man,
And I remember the first time I read this book, I was like, I can't even imagine that kind of situation, wintering in Antarctica with no food. Like, all of your clothing is soaked, and
Yeah, you're constantly cold. There is no reprieve.
there's nothing, and then you have to get into a boat and fight the ocean and icebergs to get to an absolutely inhabitable island, just to be on land for a few days before you realize, oh, this isn't gonna work. Like, it's gotta be torture. It was like 18 months for them from the moment their ship got stuck in the ice to the moment they were rescued. And that's a long time to be horribly uncomfortable or miserable, or however you want to describe it.
Goes to show you endurance of the
Exactly.
human spirit, and when it has something to, when there is an end goal in sight.
What did you guys think of the surgeries that they had to perform on Elephant Island?
It was quite amazing the way that things
Right?
turned out, because
They're so
it
lucky.
seemed like it could have ended up with death-related experiences, but it turned out, it worked out in the end.
They
Yeah,
were
that kind of
very
stuff was not
lucky.
uncommon on those sorts of expeditions.
Like, it's incredible, like, how lucky they were without getting more infection from
You want
it.
to talk about like a
Like-
series of coincidences and things that happen. We were talking about that in Gatsby,
Gatsby.
of all the things that are like how is that how would this coincidence? This is one of those stories where it's like you look at all of it and it's like, that couldn't have happened. That couldn't have happened. That could, and then it
And
actually
it did.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so
They somebody they're
It's
like,
wild.
well, we have no anesthesia, but here's some chloroform. Just
Right?
breathe it for 5 minutes, and hopefully you don't wake up while we're cutting off your toes.
Mm.
So, like there we go. And they did. They
Yeah.
prevented it from spreading, and he was able to survive. I don't know. I love this story. I think it's an amazing, and I still can't believe it's a true story.
yeah, it's wild.
Like, it just blows my mind.
What
Great
do we rate
story.
it? 0 to 5 stars. Half stars permitted. Larry.
I give it a solid 4.5, only because I don't want to give it 5.
And why
Oh,
not?
well, okay.
Because reasons.
Why not?
Where does the half star get cut off?
Yeah.
It gets cut off at the end, like between the.
Oh, there's no epilogue.
No, there was an epilogue.
Oh, I think he's being
But it wasn't.
literal.
Yeah, like literally. That last half star is the one.
Yeah,
The right half missing.
Kind of like you.
yeah. Larry's
All
just
of your shots.
Larry's
4.5. And you can't talk me out of it.
Jesse,
I gave it 5 stars the first time I read it. I'll give it 5 stars the second time too. I just love this story. It's so amazing.
Yeah, I give it a 5 stars too. The content, the way that it was written, the whole entire thing is just, it's an incredible read. It's a pretty good read.
I give it a 4 because it's just the
Thank you.
I think it's the lack of foreclosure. I think that there should have been more of a conclusion because he had the material too, where he had everything in his hands, but he decides it worked with Night, where they ended with Ellie Weissel in an empty situation, but I mean, this was not an empty situation, but
So these are very.
I think
different
they should have
scenarios.
they should have talked about what happened when they got back from to Britain,
A little bit more
I can understand.
and maybe
reconciliation.
what happened, because this came out in the late 50s. By that time, Shackleton had been gone for 37 years.
The ability to resolve all of that was
Yeah,
right.
I think that there should have been a greater sense of resolution, and I think that they were very. They went to the point of saying what toilet paper was like in Antarctica.
Yeah, he
I
was
think
very
enough.
detailed.
He
with
was
it.
very
Yes.
detailed, but I think that if you're going to be very detailed, you have to
sum it up.
you have to sum it up, and you have to also be able to elaborate on everything and not just the.
And I'm looking forward to reading the books written by the crew members and Shackleton to see like how different it might be or how similar it could be, and I wonder if they sum it up a little bit differently than Lansing did.
Well,
I
you
would
know
think
it's
so.
a good book when it's that long and you finish it off and your only complaint is, I wish there was more.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
I wish there was more. Yeah. It's like
To some
minus
extent.
a star because it wasn't long enough.
I mean, I think it was as solid as far as the book was
Yeah.
concerned,
Yeah, I
but
think
I
it was a
think
good
that there
one, too.
was areas that they should have touched on. And
Mhm.
they didn't.
Fair enough.
No,
And
I
they could
understand
have.
what you're saying. Yeah.
But it would be interesting to see the other perspectives, though, because there was a various. It was a great wave of personalities. Everybody was.
I think it
I
was
know that there was one of them.
Ordley's annoyed me, and I would
Oh.
love to have heard what his viewpoint was, because he's just like, I don't want to row because it hurts my hands, so I'm just gonna lay down in the boat. And the guy's like, it hurts everybody's hands. Like, are you kidding me? Like, fine, I'm not arguing with you. Like,
And you wasn't.
It's amazing. And they said the only thing that kept them from killing the guy was the fact that he was just so, like, he didn't try to hide it or anything.
yeah, and
He was just so open about being
Yeah.
lazy in front of everybody.
it was just
It
like,
was like his only redeeming quality is like, at least he's
And
honest.
his title here.
no, there was one point where the guy was starting to get frostbite in his foot, so he opened up his shirt, and Ordley's put the guy's frozen foot on his chest and rubbed it to help get circulation so he wouldn't get frostbite. That is the only time he actually did something that progressed
Useful.
anything.
His title. And I can only imagine.
Yeah, right.
Motor
Not gonna
expert,
row, but-
later storekeeper. What's spectacular about you have leader, second in command, captain, officer, navigator, surgeon, meteorologist, geologist, physicist, biologist, motor expert, and storekeeper.
Storekeeper.
But Harley, I thought, also had a bit of an ego.
Mhm.
I think having Shackleton felt the need to have him involved in certain things. He's the one.
Yeah,
I'm
the
trying
one
to-
guy that you put in his tent with him.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other thing too.
That guy.
Shackleton's thinking about, all right, now who can I put in what tent so that they don't end up tearing each other's heads
Because
off?
Hurley was the one that was the only one that was like, I'm angry and you're not doing things right. And it turned out he was just hungry. And as soon as they gave him a little bit more food, he was like, oh, I don't want to mutiny anymore. Like,
Again, just looking at the
he
people
was
and
just
seeing
hangry.
people. Yeah.
He's like, here, just eat some extra blubber, you'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, what a move, right?
Ugh.
If you're interested, here is a copy, my copy of Shackleton's Incredible Voyage, or Endurance, Shackleton's Incredible Voyage by Alfred Lansing. This version has a new introduction by Nathaniel Philbrick. Yes, I know who he is. I have some of these books over there.
He wrote In the Heart of the Sea. That's it.
thank you for tuning into this video. I hope you check out some more videos from our channel. And if you have yet to do so, we encourage you to subscribe. For now, keep reading.